While the women were decorated, the stench was so foul that even the most handsome men avoided them. These are the 5 worst hygiene practices of royal women that would shock you. But before we expose the shocking reality, do give us a sub because you won't believe what comes next. The royal women. History gives us a very unique image of royal women as the epitome of elegance and refinement. We picture them looking beautiful in their silky clothes, exquisite gowns, with flawless skin and manners that would serve as an example for everyone. But portraits lie, history lies, and the movies we see are nowhere near the level of accuracy that was actually going on back in the days. Behind those beautiful smiles and carefully made poses existed a reality that was so hygienic, revolting, and disgusting that most modern people would find it a complete lie.
Oh, Leonard, you're the best. It's not too much, is it?
Royal women, for all their wealth and privilege, lived in conditions that would horrify anyone with access to basic sanitation and running water. The disconnect between appearance and reality was crazy. These women had gowns worth more than people earned in their entire lifetime, yet they rarely took a bath. They had the finest feasts served on golden plates, yet their kitchens were more like sewage. They had their hair full of architectural masterpieces, yet those same hairstyles housed colonies of parasites and lice. To make matters worse, the largest palaces in Europe, including Versailles, Hampton Court, and the Winter Palace, were also monuments of human achievement and susceptible to disease. And here we're not even mocking historical figures who didn't know better. This is about understanding that privilege and power don't automatically mean comfort and health. Royal women were full of medical misconceptions, religious doctrines, and social expectations of their era, which is why they had the worst hygienic practices of all time. And now that we have the background out of the way, let's talk about 5 of the most shocking hygiene failures that define a royal woman's life across Europe's most interesting era. The fear of water. Today's bathing is so fundamental to the daily routine that skipping showers feels like a part of your soul is missing. We cannot imagine going days without washing, let alone weeks or even months. But for royal women in the 16th through 18th century, regular bathing just wasn't common. To make things worse, it was considered medically dangerous and even sinful according to their religion. The medical establishment of that era operated on principles that seem almost absurd today, but were taken as gospel by all the royal women. Doctors even believe warm water opens pores, creating pathways for disease to enter the body. They also thought that water and bathing weakened the body and made people more prone to illnesses. Now, it was the age before the germ theory, when people didn't know how diseases worked. That's where the Catholic Church added its voice to the anti-bathing chorus, not wanting public bathhouses of immortality and bathing as something accessible publicly. They even said cleanliness was less important than spiritual purity. Some religious texts even confirm the discomfort of an unwashed body as a form of mortification of the flesh, bringing one person closer to God through sheer suffering. But where do royal women fit into all this? They were caught in the middle between medical advice and religious doctrine, ideally avoiding water. However, they did wash their faces, necks, and hands with clothes that were moistened. However, these clothes weren't moistened with water but with alcohol, vinegar, or rose water. This wasn't the cleaning in any meaningful sense. Rather, it was a symbolic gesture that by using the cloth, they were removing the dirt from their soul. In the end, their skins were largely unwashed. Only on rare occasions did the baths actually come into being, but only a few times per year. The experience was far from the relaxing baths we have today. It was quite communal at that time, with family members sharing the same tub of water. Sounds gross, right? Men would go in the bath first, followed by women and children in descending order of importance. Interestingly, by the time a lower-ranking person would come, the water would be cold and filled with the gross grime of everyone who had bathed before them. Back in the Palace of Versailles, which was the ultimate symbol of royalty, they had no proper bathrooms for most of its existence. Even Marie Antoinette, who was one of the most famous women in French history, didn't have a private bath in Rome until the 1870s. Even at that time, it was considered an unusual luxury that raised people's concerns about excessive cleanliness. The consequences were exactly how we would expect. Body odor was universal and quite gross. There were skin infections that flourished at that time, and visitors from cultures with different bathing practices For example, the Ottoman Empire, where public baths were common, were disgusted with the stance that the European women had. One of the ambassadors even reported that approaching Versailles would be difficult because you could smell the palace before seeing it. What's worse is that these women would then try to hide that stench with different perfumes, which would make it even worse because then their own body odor would be mixed alongside. Waste management system.
The ornate carpeted stool also functions as a chamber pot. It was donated by Carolyn Kitts of Springfield and was used by her family in Collingdale in the 19th century.
If you think the bathing situation was bad, wait till you hear the next one. Waste management. The same place that had hundreds and thousands of people hosted amazing dinners and displays of Europe's finest art. However, this finest art couldn't even produce a functional bathroom. The disconnect was so weird that it's almost incomprehensible. How could the world's richest people live without proper toilets? This is because when the architects actually decided the place, they were thinking of luxury in almost all aspects, but forgot that basic sanitation was an afterthought. It wasn't considered at all. Instead of toilets, the royal household had chamber pots, which were portable bowls kept in bedrooms, closets, or even behind decorative screens. When someone needed to go to the washroom, they used the pot, and then servants were there to empty it. At Versailles, this problem raised a crisis level with hundreds of courtiers residing in the palace and thousands of them visiting daily. The few chamber pots available were disgusting. People took shortcuts, and men started urinating off balconies, staircases, and even behind curtains. Women had fewer options due to their unit count, so they used corners, and started having semi-private spaces when they were desperate. This gave birth to a whole other level of problems because the palace corridors that were beautiful became open sewers. Historical records are out there that state that the waste piled up in hallway stairwells, and even in rooms near where the king's court was held. The stench was so overpowering that in 1715, Louis XIV issued a decree mandating that the palace corridors should be cleaned once weekly. Even once a week, cleaning was considered such a huge upgrade at that time. And before moving forward to the next one, please subscribe to the channel if you like videos where we uncover the secrets of the past. The lice issue.
We received a lot of proposals, but I was most intrigued by your notion of...
If there's one of the worst hygiene horrors that perfectly encapsulates the grim situation of women's hygiene from the past, it would be this one. But first, we must talk about hairstyles. Hairstyles were everything in the past. There were flowers and vegetables with powdered curls and whatnot. It was almost as if there was a whole architectural masterpiece going on in these women's heads. Creating these hair models required a lot of interesting things, including materials that sound innocent enough to put on hair, but became a mess that would become the demise of these women. Unwashed hair, animal fat, warm scalp, and semi-permanent installation became the perfect breeding ground for parasites. Lice didn't just occasionally appear in these royal women, but they made their position permanent there. Royal women were constantly dealing with itching, but couldn't scratch their heads like regular women because it would ruin their beautiful style. But then, the lice sticks came into being, which were long, thin rods that were often made of ivory or decorated with silver. The irony was crazy here because these women would spend hours or even days getting their hair fixed, and then dining on disease. And how can we forget the grand banquets of the European courts, right? These were some of the most visually appealing things. Tables stretched across the rooms as stars stretch across the horizon. From some freshly picked vegetables to roasted meats and amazing delicacies, there was everything that needed to replace our usual food. Feasts looked quite elegant in themselves, and the taste? Well, amazing, according to the people who were eating them. But what those people didn't know was how these foods were being produced, because if they did, they'd puke out. The kitchens that produced these amazing meals were nightmares of contamination that would shut down any modern-day restaurant within minutes. The plumbing failures that plagued the rest of Versailles extended to food preparation areas with consequences that were deadly. Many historical records show us that sewage would sometimes back up to the palace kitchens. That means raw sewage waste would be connected to the kitchen. His historical records show us that sewage would sometimes back up in the palace kitchens, and raw wastewater contaminated those spaces. These plumbing issues were never addressed, and there were flies and rats roaming in the very places where food was being cooked. While foods were quite tasty, food poisoning was so common among countries that mild gastrointestinal issues were expected after most meals. Even things like diarrhea and vomiting were routine experiences for people, even when they were eating the finest cuisine in Europe. Parasites and tapeworms thrived in undercooked meals, and intestinal worms were nearly universal amongst people. For royal women, they were struggling with nausea, cramps, and even worse things, childbirth practices. Last on our list is the childbirth practices in Europe, because nothing was like that. When a high-ranking queen or noblewoman went through labor, the birthing chamber would fill with observers. This wouldn't be just doctors and midwives, but everyone else too. They would be just standing there to witness the birth of babies. This is because royal birth had to be witnessed to prevent any possibility of fraud, and courts feared that a stillborn baby or unwanted daughter might be secretly replaced with a healthy male heir. Marie Antoinette's first childbirth gives us a horrific scene because she began hemorrhaging after delivery. The windows were sealed shut, and combined with the body heat of dozens of observers, along with the summer, the room was hot. Many royal women even fainted, which made the situation worse. The emotional trauma of laboring while being watched like a performer was something truly terrifying. Thus, infection and disease were inevitable. Infant mortality was also something quite worrying because 1 in 3 children born in royal families died before the age of 3, despite having the best medical care of that time available. With that, our 5 worst hygiene practices of the royal women from the past have ended. Which one made you the most awkward? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy the video, please make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like these.